First of all, we would like to apologize yet again for taking so long on this. A combination of tragedies on the farm on our end, yes, we live on a farm, we're a living farmhand, and family life on Adam's end, has kept us from being able to work on this series for over half a year, which we're both quite serious about wanting to get out much faster than that. However, it gave us time to really focus on our research, and from there, more problems arose with the breakdown of the Borg Collective. Simply put, we just kept finding more and more outrageous things that the Borg would, or at least might be able to do. There was also a lot of math having to be done, which required consistent research, somewhat beyond our personal specialty. That being said, with the holidays finally over, the wet season forcing work to slow down at the farm, and all manner of other things being generally settled, we can return to this series and give you all what you've been asking for. To be honest, we're very small potatoes in this community at large, but we were surprised at how many comments we got asking if we were going to continue this series. Rest assured, we and Adam have decided together that this series will be going on for quite a long time. We have no intention of simply ending it after the breakdowns with a quick and easy description of how the Borg or 40k universe would win, and leave it at that. Instead, we plan on having an episodic journey of sorts, fully scripted in several different perspectives, starting with the Borg entry into the 40k universe within the Halo stars. From there, we hope to cover every major step of the way with Adam and hopefully attract folks that have similar passion for the project. Eventually, as they arise, we will also have other breakdowns to highlight the many horrifying combatants the Borg will inevitably face. For now, welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers! Today we're returning to our long-term series, which we'll be calling Borghammer with Adam Skeptic. Last couple videos we discussed at length Warhammer 40k's Imperium of Man, the biggest and most directly representative power in their universe. This time around, we'll begin a comprehensive breakdown on their soon-to-be enemies. Today, exploring the most consistently powerful antagonist in the entirety of their own universe, the Borg Collective from Star Trek. As always, we have our more technically minded partner in crime, Adam Skeptic. Feel free to say hi, Adam.
It's good to be back. Let's do this.
For a bit of a disclaimer, while we are not using the Borg Collective post-2380, especially since the Jurati Collective requires so many assumptions, we will be using facts relating to the artifact from Star Trek Picard, since the artifact is an early 2380s Borg cube design, and is probably therefore representative of the cubes we'll be using in this particular breakdown. Furthermore, its general nature as a 3x3x3 kilometer titanium death machine simply gives more information to work with, so we'll be using fleeting Picard references and clips as general information. Nothing too specific, just the things we can feasibly extend to other cubes in the collective: durability, size, internal space, layout, resources, etc. Like with the Imperium, let's just start with the standards of FTL that the Borg Collective uses. Post-2380, the Borg get around with a standard-issue transwarp coil. Able to bore transwarp conduits through subspace using these coils, any Borg ship can fling themselves across the galaxy at roughly 1 to 10 million times the speed of light without external intervention. Using a stolen one of these coils, the USS Voyager was able to travel 20,000 light-years in just a few days in Voyager Dark Frontier. Borg transwarp coils provide speed enough to keep up with and even tow ships like Voyager across the Delta Quadrant considerably faster than those ships would be able to travel by themselves. More importantly, provided a transwarp hub, the Borg can travel across the galaxy in mere minutes. See Voyager Endgame, showing off an impressive 30,000 light-year jump in about 5 minutes. Even without a hub, individual Borg ships can use their transwarp coils to travel across the known galaxy in days to weeks. While it's easy to consider that the Borg Collective has access to more mainstream warp technology, as seen in Starfleet, they clearly get around a lot faster by transwarp. As far as ships go, of course, we have the Cube. These are the workhorses of the Borg, the most common ship of the Collective, designed for assimilation and combat. 6 sides of sexy sameness. Perfection, right there. Able to crash into a planet completely unpowered and unprotected and be just fine, these 3-kilometer cubes have no discernible anatomy compared to normal ships, and hold an eerie green glow that is sure to confuse and intimidate as they come onto anyone's view screen. Sadly, we don't have much to go on for Borg cube stats personally, but we can assume almost all Borg technology is almost certainly better, quote-unquote, than nearly all technologies the Federation has on hand across all metrics. Because of this extremely loose comparison, you'll have to forgive us for being relatively nonchalant about their power ratings. As a general rule, assume that we'll be adding about 20% to any and all known maximum statistics for Borg technology when compared to the best that the Star Trek universe has to offer. If the best showing of Star Trek weapons we have puts their range at 100,000 kilometers, we will assume that the Borg Collective can manage around 120,000 kilometers for their own range, etc.
The Federation's first contact with the Borg was messy. Q slammed the Enterprise D into the Delta Quadrant to prove a point to Picard that they were not ready for what they were going to face, and by they, he meant the Federation. Picard then straight ignored a warning from Guinan, a Delta Quadrant native, mind you, who had dealt with the Borg, and her advice was to just beat feet back to Federation space, but Picard decided to get his exploration on. The Borg carved into the Enterprise like a metal turkey, and it took a lot of no, don't do that on the part of the Enterprise to stop that. They obliterated a lot of the cube in the process, and it had regenerated about 20% of its mass in 20 minutes. When they eventually started to run, the cube was on that ass, to the point that Picard had to bite the bullet, apologize to Q, and almost beg him to get them back to Federation space. A couple dozen crew members died in the process, and they learned how far out of their depth they were. The Borg were relentless, wearing down the shields and doing what they could to disrupt the warp field to force the ship back to impulse, gradually and unstoppably gaining while repairing at the same time.
And that doesn't even begin to cover their ferocity. In the Battle of Wolf 359, a single Borg cube destroyed 39 Starfleet ships and killed or assimilated over 11,000 people. It was such a slaughter that the Klingon Empire was mustering forces to help in the defense, and calling upon the Romulan Star Empire was seriously considered. What's worse, there's no running from a cube, or hiding, because even just a sphere, the lesser ship to the cube, has sensors that can easily reach out to 50 light-years in any given direction as shown in Voyager. That being said, Starfleet sensors already reach out to around 17 light-years, and Voyager's upgraded astrometrics bay could monitor over 3 billion stars simultaneously, which some fool over at the Sci-Fi Stack Exchange estimates to cover out to 2,500 light-years in radius, at least. Mind you, there's no solid information on that, but suffice to say that this Borg-enhanced astrometrics bay was a lot better than the standard sensor range. We can therefore assume that the Borg can detect things accurately out to around 50 light-years, and for all we know, the Borg could have even more potent sensors we just haven't seen precedent for. First and foremost, let's talk Tritanium. While actual showings on screen are surprisingly uncertain, at least we have a specific measurement for Tritanium's strength. Tritanium is specifically, quote, 21.4 times as hard as diamond, unquote, according to Spock in the original series episode Obsession, and we do not doubt Spock. The problem is that, quote, hard as diamond, unquote, is a bit of a misnomer. Diamond is actually quite brittle, for example, and we don't imagine that a simple hammer hitting Tritanium will leave it shattered all over the table. That being said, we've been using generalizations with 40K for the same sort of information, so we're going to be fair here and assume that Spock at the time meant that Tritanium is approximately 21.4 times more durable than the highest strength in Diamond's strongest category across all applicable metrics. This makes Tritanium extremely powerful for standard science fiction settings, possessing enough oomph to survive planetary re-entry and full unpowered impact without any sign of damage or stress. We can see this in Picard Season 1, Episode 9, Et in Arcadia Ego. While we won't be taking much of Picard into account, we think this is a reasonable enough showing to be used, as the artifact is a pretty standard cube to when we're pulling the collective from. Tritanium is also the standard material for the Borg to use in all of its potential applications, from the infrastructure of their drones to the entirety of their ships, to the hilarious megastructures they build in open space hundreds of kilometers wide. Tritanium is so strong that 1 out of 3 Borg cubes were able to survive the wholesale explosion of an entire planet at the hands of species 8472. How powerful is that? Well, fortunately, we have a relatively similar feat in science fiction that everyone knows about, and has plenty of information on the physics of it all. Oh, yeah, baby! We never thought we'd get to use Star Wars to measure Star Trek. Excellent. You want to take this one, Adam? What sort of numbers are we working with here?
So, what we're looking at here isn't just a regular explosion that cracks a planet. No, this is much worse. This kind of planetary destruction overcomes the gravitational binding force of the planet. What that means is that the explosion is so violent that there is no way for gravity to reform the planet, and every single piece has achieved escape velocity, which is about 7 miles a second. There's actually a number we can put to that. To turn a planet the mass of Earth into a permanent asteroid field takes 10 to the 32nd joules of energy. For some kind of perspective on that number, it's the energy release of a little more than 533,000 of the nuclear bombs we dropped on Hiroshima, all at once.
And 1 out of 3 Borg cubes survived this sort of supernuclear ultra blast in the clip. Granted, it was farther away than all of the others, but it was still showered with bits of planet and explosive debris after having been in a skirmish with Species 8472, and while towing Voyager across the Delta Quadrant.
I think it's probably safe to estimate that it took about 3/4 of that energy based on the distance.
Which means that the average Borg cube, as this was, probably has enough durability to survive a shot that would crack a planet in half. Around 400,000 Hiroshima bombs all at once in the same spot. As of 2364, according to TNG Arsenal of Freedom, Federation weapons were not able to melt tritanium, with the tritanium actually in use by the Federation melted down in gigantic orbital foundries and metallurgical research facilities to prepare things like bulkheads for starships. But let's not focus on just the defense here, because the Borg Collective comes from a universe wherein things are just different. Let's talk about the phaser. This is not, for the record, the most common weapon in the Star Trek universe. On paper, that title belongs to the Disruptor, standard issue in most of the Federation's typical enemies like the Romulans and the Klingons. Disruptors take matter and disrupt the bonds between the molecules, tearing whatever is hit by a disruptor to atomic dust. We've even seen the Veyron T disruptor in TNG The Most Toys, of which there are only a few, was made specifically to tear apart a target slowly from the inside out to maximize agony. It will do so in a single shot consistently. Starfleet, however, insists it isn't a military, so they've spent their time perfecting phasers. Phasers fire concentrated nadion particle streams, which, at their most powerful, can absolutely vaporize a human instantly, just like a disruptor, but otherwise have many other utilitarian uses, from smelting native metals for impromptu tools in the field to cauterizing wounds, to heating up rocks to provide light and heat in a survival situation, and even cleaning off carbon filters, for which phasers may be set to a wide beam. This makes the phaser less of a weapon and more of a wild energy-blasting multi-tool, which suits the Starfleet way of going about things. More than that, nadion particle streams may be apparently altered in frequency to allow them to be a functionally different energy source for each fire, which was used to good effect against the Borg post-2375 to avoid letting them fully adapt to Starfleet weaponry. It is important to also note that phasers do seem to be able to hit ships at warp, and fighting has been done between ships in mid-warp before, meaning that they must go at least as fast as light speed. This also makes a lot of sense for the older showings of phasers, which often simply appear as lines between the shooter and target before disappearing just as fast as they arrived.
The complexity of phasers and other directed energy weapons in Star Trek has made photonic discharge weapons, aka lasers, largely obsolete by the 24th century, as described in the Next Generation episode Conundrum and the Next Generation episode The Outrageous Okana, where the Enterprise just looked at these lasers like they were literally nothing. The exception to this rule, however, is the Borg cutting laser, which can cut through Starfleet ships like a turkey, like we talked about earlier. The cube has many arrays of cutting beams and all work at maximum efficiency and damage until roughly 80% of the ship has been critically damaged or outright destroyed. A challenge for any enemy that cannot simply destroy a Borg ship outright.
These cutting lasers are so extremely effective that they've been known, together with the Borg tractor beam, to carve out and pull entire cities off of a planet. And we can assume that the Borg tractor beams are effective at least at ranges equivalent to their lasers, since the two are designed to work together, with tractor beams holding enemy ships in place while the lasers cut up the ships for assimilation. The Star Trek TNG Technical Manual lists maximum effective range for ship phasers arrays is about 300,000 kilometers, while the maximum effective firing range for photon torpedoes on the Galaxy class is listed to be around 3.5 million kilometers, quote, for mid-range detonation yield, unquote, and Voyager has tricobalt isoton warheads that are said to be able to shoot across light years. While on-screen showings of combat tend to be a little bit less distant for the sake of being visible in the show, we still have some noteworthy showings in episodes like TNG The Wounded, where Cardassians and Federation simply start shooting at around 300,000 kilometers. Since this scenario shows a Borg vessel rather considerably later than the Wounded, we can assume that both their magnetometric guided charges and cutting lasers have similar minimum ranges to what the technical manual says, with 350,000 kilometers being a respectably conservative range for the Borg to start chopping you up, and with 4 to 5 million or so kilometers being a good distance for their torpedo analogs. Magnetometric guided charges have very little written information on them, but we are aware that they are able to detect and hunt down ships even in scenarios wherein standard sensors are ineffective, guided to their target by its own metallic nature. For the sake of things, we'll be using Isoton Yields here to describe the guided charges, and we'll probably put them at something around 200 isotons to match them up with Voyager's Class 6 tricobalt warheads, as the two existed alongside each other in the general timescope of this scenario. For reference, 25 isotons is the standard photon torpedo and is able to destroy a space-age city, quote, in seconds, unquote. The city of New York is just under 9 million people in population and is just under 475 square miles in area, so if we assume that a single 25 isoton warhead can destroy a city in seconds, we have to assume that it is something along the lines of 1 New York City's worth of destruction. A 90 isoton warhead, for further reference, has an explosion/fireball radius of around 800 kilometers. That being said, these isoton totals can be shifted around and tailored to the job at hand. This means that the average Borg cube could easily blast an enemy on Earth while sitting on the surface of the moon, and several times a minute at that, with standard Federation ships seeming to have phaser fire interval of around 2 or 3 shots per second in good on-screen showings. Getting even beefier, magnetometric guided charges, which presumably move about as fast as a photon torpedo, could blast you at a statistically significant fraction of the distance to Mars. And when they hit you, they really, really hit you, both laser and charge. But what about on the personal level? How does the average Borg defend itself?
The personal Borg shield is a standard issue shield that will absorb or stop most anything fired at it. If something does get through, it will only work on a handful of drones before the whole collective adapts to the weakness and the other drones coming at you become immune to that particular blast. This usually applies to energy-based weapons that can have various frequencies. Notably, Picard killed several Borg on a holodeck when the safeties were disengaged. The only explanation I can come up with is that the light and shield frequency for each holographic bullet was unique, or that it was a full-on projectile, and projectile weapons from modern day are effective against a shield meant to block pure energy weapons. Picard states they are holographic bullets and not physical munitions, though, but either way, we have yet to see what kinetic weapons like bullets do to Borg personal shields, and in fact they have been seen to repel physical attacks.
As we showed in the first video of this series via a clip from TNG Best of Both Worlds, it can repel a whole Klingon without any difficulty. However, as mentioned in the caveats video at the beginning of this series, we'll grant that perhaps the stubborn nature of solid matter might take more energy to shield against. That being said, we can absolutely guarantee that the Borg Collective has a shield at least on par with that of Kivas Fajo in TNG The Most Toys, wherein data is collected for being the only Soong-type android known to exist. This personal force field was shown to throw data across an entire room, several body lengths. It would be illogical to assume that the Borg Collective, the most powerful and largest threat in the Star Trek universe, has personal shield technology less capable than this, so we can still assume that most Borg shields can take physical attacks and kinetic damage just fine. If you want to see how we'll be managing specifically how Borg shields adapt, see the caveats video linked in the description. It's also reasonable to assume, as mentioned in that video, that assimilating someone via nanoprobe tubules requires a drone to lower their personal shield. Or that is what we initially thought. However, in showings of Prodigy, DS9, Voyager, and TNG, the Borg have been shown to grab at people and inject them with nanoprobes while their shields actively defended them against attacks. While these showings are rare, they are there, and this has changed our mind on the idea of Borg personal shields. This was merely a discovery that made us add to the script. Because of this, we will actually be altering our ruling from the caveats video to account for the updated information. Though it is still important to remember how strong drones can be even without their shields, which we'll talk about later. What makes Borg shield technology so powerful, however, is how it adapts. While originally it was only drones that possessed shields, after the TNG era, Borg ships began to emulate Starfleet and take on shields for ships as a bit of extra defense, and they follow all of the same rules as the personal shields seen on drones. You see, Borg shields, no, the Borg Collective itself, isn't just some static thing. It gets better with every interaction.
One of the main reasons it's just so hard to put the Borg down is their ability to adapt to tactics and weapons brought against them. Normally, this wouldn't be that big of a deal. We adapt to things all the time, and so do any armies. The Borg, however, do it across the board virtually instantly. You kill a handful of drones or damage a ship critically, and the entire collective within range, which we've established is quite a vast distance, has uniformly devised and implemented a counter. So not only is the energy frequency of the weapon you're using worthless against the drones in front of you, but it's also useless in the next star system when more drones show up on another world you control, at least if that frequency is standard. Starfleet and other spacefaring organizations don't generally have the ability to quickly and efficiently change the standard frequency of their weapons or shields with the kind of speed the Borg are capable of adapting to them. This is especially evident in phasers and phaser rifles, as changing their operating frequency is a process that requires breaking the weapon down in some capacity. After the Borg adapt, you're better off using it as an improvised weapon and hoping for the best.
Even the complete and instant destruction of a Borg vessel allows for sufficient data to be collected that the same attack never quite hits as hard. Through various means of technological trickery, the Borg's adaptation can be leapfrogged or stymied for a short period of time, but in the end, the collective is so vast and the processing power within so great that assimilation is nearly always guaranteed for weapons that don't have some special ability or quality that makes them inherently difficult to determine the nature of. Even weapons of total annihilation, like the neurolytic pathogen, specifically designed to completely destroy the Borg's unity in Voyager Endgame, were ultimately assimilated and adapted to completely within mere minutes. And once one Borg adapts to something completely, they all do. Do not, however, doubt the power of technological trickery just yet, if you have it available. Things like transphasic ammunition that alternates frequencies between every shot are a mainstay in the Federation and their allies against the Borg Collective. And the use of high-quality computer systems that can freely and effectively randomize frequencies can give a near infinite number of different energy patterns to alternate between. That being said, this generally requires some pretty top-of-the-line research and development, so it may not be available at all times. While resistance may be futile, the inevitable might be forestalled.
When you think of the Borg as a group, it's best to think of them as a walking virus. They spread much like a virus does through your own body, but instead of destroying the host body/cell, as a lot of viruses do, think of them as something like a retrovirus, implanting their own genetic code, so to speak, into something and taking it over. Nanoprobes are the method used to begin not only the assimilation process, but are a large part of the system that's been used to adapt both drones and vessels to threats. They are instrumental in repair and defenses like shield modification.
After being injected into an unfortunate victim, nanoprobes immediately go to infesting and reproducing throughout the victim's body. While earlier nanoprobes were much slower to assimilate and required all manner of surgical attachments to finish a drone's assimilation process after hours of biological infiltration first brought the victim into the fold, sometime after 2373, the Borg Collective drastically improved their assimilation process. Post-2373 Borg nanoprobes seem able to assimilate the average human in seconds to minutes at most, and eventually build all the necessary Borg attachments on site, allowing the cortical implant, eye replacement, tubules, and everything else to slowly form underneath the new drone's skin before erupting outward. Perhaps more terrifying, if they find something that their nanoprobes cannot assimilate, the Borg have shown themselves more than capable of loading their nanoprobes with viruses, poisons, and other hideous things to break down whatever they fail to take over. And, of course, this doesn't even begin to cover how the nanoprobes don't only work on living things. Injected via assimilation tubules into an engineering console, the nanoprobes will work on autopilot to assimilate and gradually alter any substance that they come in contact with. In the context of this scenario, that means they can even slowly but surely assimilate basic materials. The walls of a starship, for example. Given enough time, even a few nanoprobes injected into a strategic location, machine, or person will become billions that will spread out and continue assimilating everything close to them. Perhaps even more terrifying, it's been shown that Borg nanoprobes can be loaded up on photon torpedoes and shot at things. They can be released into air filtration systems and infect you by way of the very air itself. In general, they work by reprogramming the very matter of your DNA and adding both the biological and technological distinctiveness that the Borg Collective has assimilated into you. Not only that, but they can heal, such that in Voyager Mortal Coil, 7 of 9 use nanoprobes to bring Neelix back to life after 18 hours of death. They can filter out alcohol and synthahol from the system extremely fast, and they can even be used to strengthen warp fields or recover DNA from radiation and poison. With the nanoprobe on their side, every Borg is a one-man army that can heal, hack, hurt, and assimilate all in one neat package. And everyone that they assimilate thereafter gets all the same standard issue stuff in mere minutes.
Now, we mentioned earlier that the Borg will adapt very quickly, not just the ones in front of you, but potentially a star system neighboring where you're at. That's because their communication network is leaps and bounds ahead of anything the Federation or any other species in Trek has. The Hive communicates in real time with any or all drones simultaneously across literal light years. But distance, even with subspace frequencies, is still an issue. Without a high-powered transmitter like the interplexing beacon that was being constructed on the Enterprise East deflector dish, a standard subspace signal would still take almost 200 years to reach from Borg territory in the Delta Quadrant to Federation space. But somehow the journey for a starship across more than 75,000 light-years would take Voyager at max cruising velocity of 9.75, 60 or 70 years. Hold on a fucking minute. Can starships outrun their own subspace signals? Shai, am I seeing this right?
It would appear to be so, but then again, Shangri-La ships sort of work like that at their fastest. Ships can travel considerably faster through their engines than lasers or other standards of communication can, and most of the Federation Authority uses entangled communication buoys, so why would communication need to go faster than the ships? And, of course, that's how Stargate SG-1 communication works. Transit is far faster than communication capacity, so they just use the gates themselves to send basic radio signals and stuff through. No need to do things the new-fashioned way when ships actually get where they're going faster than your email. We're not saying it's the same way here, but we're sure that there is indeed an explanation. Suffice to say that drone-to-drone communication with the Borg Collective is even faster than that. Absolutely instantaneous, even.
Subspace relays. Yeah, sure. Gotta have some way to limit communications for the plot, even though everyone and their mother can talk in real time while one of them is traveling faster than light. Sure. Because fuck physics, that's why. That made my brain twist harder than I thought it would.
Regardless, the Borg need not worry about such logistical nightmares, as their ability to communicate with each other across great distances is absolutely guaranteed, even across the distances of some dimensions, such as fluidic space. There have been times, however, when communication to the collective, for one reason or another, has been cut off, as will be the case in this scenario once it begins. All the same, the Borg Collective is obsessive about retrieving any and all lost members. If a single drone is found to be missing, they will find it, and they will retrieve it, and they will assimilate whatever led it astray.
Not necessarily. When Ichep and the other Borg kids were stranded in a cube because of a tech disease Ichep brought with him, that entire cube was abandoned by the collective, deemed irrelevant for retrieval, possibly due to the only living members being juveniles and not completely assimilated drones like Q had been from the next generation. If the risk outweighs the benefits, they will cut loose an entire cube.
And by cut loose, the Borg Collective would prefer to mean self-destruct, but sometimes that just isn't an option. Information is otherwise transmitted to all Borg drones instantly, and all Borg drones collectively make the decision for that single drone of what is best to do. And, terrifyingly, you're awake the entire time within the hive mind. You can see everything you do. You are aware of the people you are killing and assimilating, and you love it. You feel at complete and total peace with it, even if you academically know that what you are doing is abhorrent and want nothing but for it to stop. It doesn't matter. No one consciousness can resist the whole. Resistance is futile.